Protecting sensitive data, both in transit and at rest, is imperative for modern enterprises as attackers find increasingly innovative ways to compromise systems and steal data. So how do enterprises effectively protect data that are in transit and at rest? I'm Jill Malandrino, correspondent for Tag Cyber, and joining me to discuss is Alex Harrington, co-founder and CEO of SecureCo. Alex has over 20 years leading startups and growth technology enterprises. Alex, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Tag Cyber.
Thank you, Jill. Pleased to be here.
All right. And prior to SecureCo, you were the CEO and board member of PeerStream, a public communications technology company, and other leadership roles in internet connections, digital media, social networking. Having experience across multiple verticals in tech, how have you seen the industry evolve in terms of cybersecurity challenges and strategy?
Well, going back 20 years, computer hacking was more like vandalism than anything it looks like today. And cybersecurity was little more than antivirus software and PCI compliance to protect payment information. So, in the interim, we've seen hacking become both a huge industry and a weapon of geopolitical conflict. So it's been a huge growth curve. And right now, the scale of cybercrime is absolutely enormous. I mean, if it were a country, it would rank third in GDP after the US and China. So virtually all businesses are affected, and cybersecurity has become integral to running a business of any scale at this point.
I mean, it really does put it into context when you think about the third largest in terms of GDP. What are some of the challenges associated with protecting internet connections and the movement of data?
Well, the problem is right now everything is connected, even things that didn't used to be computers like a soda dispensing machine or a parking meter. These are now all computers and hooked up to the internet. And so, connected computers and devices tend to have exposed endpoints. And collectively, that's known as a company's attack surface. And these endpoints are discoverable. And threat actors, what they do is they scan the endpoints and they learn about the software and make inferences about the vulnerabilities associated with those network systems. And so the network perimeter is larger and more vulnerable than ever. And the result is disruption attacks, breach, and ransomware. And so that's one side of it. And then the data itself, when it's sent over the internet, even if it's encrypted, it can be discovered, it can be analyzed, redirected, tampered with, or obstructed. And so the defensibility of network endpoints and the integrity of the data in transit, those are the things that we focus on at SecureCo.
What sectors are the most vulnerable to sensitive IP?
So, there are many types of data that are vulnerable. Intellectual property, of course, is a key target of hackers, and so that calls to mind, for example, pharma and biotech companies that have invested billions of dollars in their IP. But there's also national security data, which is why the government is one of the biggest targets that hackers go after. There's private personal information, and for that, hackers generally turn to the healthcare targets and education targets. And then finally, last but not least is financial information. So banks, insurance companies, they're some of the biggest targets that the threat actors are pursuing.
And of course, when it comes to education and healthcare, of course, those are the most vulnerable of populations. So Alex, are cybersecurity teams equipped with what they need for today's challenges to keep networks secure and reduce the number and size of network attack surfaces?
Well, yeah, there are lots of very valuable tools out there that are in use today by network administrators and cybersecurity teams, focused on protecting attack surface. So you have detect and response systems that help network administrators identify and mitigate breaches. And then you have attack surface management services that help identify the extent of the attack surface and try to identify defensive priorities. So these are all really important tools. I think what SecureCo is offering completes that picture, though, because a key focus going forward needs to be methods not just to identify and mitigate the attack surface, but to proactively reduce it, and not just to catch a breach early on and minimize harm, but to keep it from happening in the first place.
So in general, are enterprises proactive enough with their cybersecurity strategy? And explain to us in more detail where SecureCo fits in the cybersecurity ecosystem.
So, I think to answer your first question, are they proactive enough? There's a whole spectrum, but in general, there are many, many diligent and talented people in the industry working in cyber. The problem is that cyber defense teams have to be right all the time, and hackers really just need to find that one occasional mistake. And so a misconfiguration or an unpatched vulnerability opens the door to hackers. And the problem is that as networks scale, the complexity grows in 3 dimensions. And so a company with 10x the employees compared to another company might have 10 times the cybersecurity resources, but it might have 100 times the challenges. And so these are the things that makes cyber a really tough job. So, where do we fit into the cybersecurity ecosystem? So we offer secure connectivity solutions that often replace VPNs or dedicated telecom circuits. We integrate into zero trust SASE implementations, and common use cases are remote access, secure mobility, corporate campus networking, and secure cloud connectivity. Those are the main use cases that we encounter.
How does SecureCo minimize vulnerabilities that have been exposed?
Well, there are really 2 powerful dimensions to our solution. One is that endpoint protection, or really concealment of the endpoint. So the way we do that is we establish connections, the connections between the 2 devices or people or computers, entities that are talking to each other. We establish that connection by having both sides meet in the middle. And that's a patented technology called rendezvous. And we do it this way because the network administrators can close on the port, the computer networking ports on both ends. They can close the ingress ports on their firewalls, which makes those endpoints invisible to the typical type of hacker reconnaissance scans. And so what that does is it reduces risk and vulnerability, and it also reduces the cost of managing the network because there are many fewer network security incidents that happen as a result of the obfuscation of those endpoints. And then the second dimension to our solution is we protect the data as it traverses the internet. And there's several techniques that we use that involve anonymization, evasive routing, and decoy data injection that really act as sort of camouflage for the data as it's traversing the internet and make it hard for threat actors to identify, target, or interfere with our clients' data. So both of these security dimensions help prevent some of the biggest cyber challenges that we're facing today, data breaches and ransomware attacks.
And is this what differentiates SecureCo solutions?
Yeah, so in a word, what differentiates us is obfuscation. So we bring stealth, anonymization, and obfuscation to the fight against hackers. And these are tools that the military and intelligence agencies have been using these techniques for years, and so have hackers, frankly. So, we make these tools available to enterprise, and now as the landscape evolves and nation state sponsored hackers are now the key threat that enterprise has to fight against, it helps to fight fire with fire. We're using similar techniques now for defensive posture and really up the level of the game for enterprise.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the term military, because cybersecurity professionals such as yourself, it's almost like electricity. You can't see what you're working with. It's not like it's a physical, there's an enemy coming across the front line and you're able to identify them and see them, but you're you're fighting something that's invisible. How do you see cybersecurity evolving, and what are going to be the biggest challenges?
Well, look, I think the trajectory of escalation in the industry has been very, very steep. The sophistication, the persistence, and the aggressiveness of our adversaries keep escalating. And, it's no longer a kid in their basement that is messing around with your network. It's China, it's Russia, it's Iran, and the huge infrastructure that they bring. I mean, China's known to have a hacker workforce of like 300,000 people. So, these are the threats that have materialized in the last 5 to 10 years that are now not just directed at other nation states, but directed at enterprise itself, seeking to disrupt, to potentially cause harm on a national security level, or to for economic gain, right? To steal. So this is the direction the industry is going, and frankly, there's just going to be a continued arms race, and the enterprise companies just have to bring their A game along with the federal government to keep up with that level of escalation.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it seems as if cybersecurity 1.0, if you will, it was all about trying to extort money from companies, but now it seems to be disruption or acquiring data is where these cyber criminals really seem to be focused. Are there areas within the industry that have been successful in mitigating attacks? What are we getting a handle around?
Yeah, sure. There are definitely success stories. I mean, a big one that we're all quite aware of is the threat of social engineering, otherwise known as phishing, and essentially methods to get your password and your login credentials and steal your access. That there have been a number of useful tools and training activities that have made employees of companies and just consumers in general just much more aware of that threat. And frankly, the numbers have subsided a bit. And in fact, now direct attacks on network vulnerabilities have sort of pulled even with social engineering in terms of the initial access that causes these security incidents. But it just means that essentially there's a new bottleneck and a new challenge to meet, right? Because the hackers will go wherever there's the least resistance. And so wherever you have, a win, you can count on the hackers to find another area of vulnerability to go after.
And of course, everyone in the industry is talking about generative AI and the potential challenges that opens up. How is the industry thinking about that on a high level?
Well, I mean, I think in general, it's automation of threat activity is just integral to how hackers operate. So, a lot of the threat activity that a company experiences, the scans, the probes, it's all based on automated activities that hackers are scripting. And there's actually, no human involved until quite late in the process. So I think with the introduction of AI, it's just going to bring new scale and effectiveness to the automation that hackers are using. But with any luck, we're going to be able, I mean, we're already using AI in terms of screening threats on the defense side. So hopefully we, again, can fight fire with fire and use that tool as effectively for defense as the bad guys are using it for, crime.
All right, Alex, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Tag Cyber, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, correspondent with Tag Cyber.
Thanks, Jill.